President Vladimir Putin, a leader who, for 4 years, declared ultimate victory, recently stated, "I think this matter is coming to an end." These words, uttered after a dramatically curtailed Victory Day parade, might sound like a signal of de-escalation. Yet, a closer look at the events of May 9, 2026, suggests they may instead be the starkest admission of a profound shift in power, challenging the long-held assumption of Russia's unwavering strength. For 20 years, Putin used Red Square as a showcase of his power. Tanks would roll through, intercontinental ballistic missiles would glide across the cobblestones, and Putin would speak for hours. But on May 9, 2026, Putin fled the stage in just 10 minutes. There were no tanks, no missiles, no allies like Xi Jinping. Instead, a 7-minute pre-recorded propaganda video was shown. Mobile internet in Moscow was cut. The fireworks display was cancelled. And Putin had to ask Trump for a ceasefire just to hold his parade, because Ukraine had been pounding Moscow with drones for weeks, and he couldn't secure Red Square on his own. Hours later, when he faced reporters, he said something we hadn't heard in 4 years. And he was no longer addressing his enemy as a neo-Nazi gang, but as Mr. Zelensky. These words could be interpreted as a sign of peace. But when you put together everything that happened in Red Square on May 9th, the picture that emerges seems to tell a story of defeat for Putin. To understand Putin's behavior, what he was compelled to do, and the gravity of his panicked escape from the ceremony, we must first understand why this parade matters so much. You need to know what it represents. In Russia, a large part of what Victory Day symbolizes goes back to the Battle of Kursk in 1943. That year, the Soviets deployed 6,000 tanks, suffered over 1 million casualties, but launched the beginning of the end for Hitler. That battle was the turning point of World War II, and the Victory Day parade carries exactly this legacy. The memory of a war that killed more than 26 million Soviet citizens. According to polls, more than 60% of Russian citizens consider this the most important holiday of the year. And now, Russia is fighting very close to Kursk, nearly the same territory. The 2026 heirs of the army that deployed 6,000 tanks in 1943 couldn't put a single tank on Red Square. For the first time in approximately 19 years, no military vehicles passed through Red Square. This absence is unprecedented in modern Russian history, where military might has always been central to the Victory Day spectacle. It starkly contrasts with the historical precedent of showcasing overwhelming force, suggesting a strategic decision driven by either severe depletion or an acute awareness of vulnerability, rather than mere logistical challenges. The ceremony lasted a total of 45 minutes, the shortest parade in modern Russian history. The 2025 ceremony had lasted 90 minutes. Previous years exceeded 1 hour. Russian MP Yevgeny Popov told the BBC, "Our tanks are busy right now. They're fighting," but the footage coming from the front questions this explanation. Russia's battlefield tanks are now being protected by welding metal plates and cages onto them using First World War logic. Bringing these turtle tanks, as Western media calls them, to Red Square would have been even more humiliating than not holding a parade at all. What replaced the tanks was perhaps the most striking summary of the situation. A 7-minute pre-recorded video. Submarines, long-range bombers, drone forces, all on screen, as if saying, "We don't have the real equipment, but here's a movie for you." But if the weapons in those images were truly powerful enough to change the course of war, they would be in use on the front lines right now. We already know that Ukraine, a country without a navy, sank much of Russia's Black Sea fleet, and that the famous Kuznets aircraft carrier was smoking its way through the Mediterranean. And one detail visible on the square was perhaps the most bizarre piece of the puzzle: North Korean soldiers. For the first time in history, troops from a foreign country marched in the Victory Day parade in official uniforms. This marks a significant departure from Russia's traditional self-reliant image, where the parade served as a testament to its independent military prowess. Historically, such events project national strength, not reliance on external partners for ceremonial displays. It raises questions about the true depth of Russia's military capacity and its international standing. The country claiming to be the world's largest nuclear power may be forced to bring soldiers from North Korea for its own national holiday. We already know they're buying them to fight on the front lines, too. The stands told the same story. In 2025, Xi Jinping and 27 heads of state sat beside Putin. This year, there was Lutsenko, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, the King of Malaysia, and Laos. That was it. China was clearly distancing itself from Russia's war. Duma members and government officials were absent from the main stands. International press was restricted. CNN and several other outlets were denied access. The legacy of the army that won victory with 6,000 tanks at Kursk in 1943. In 2026, it was attempted to be filled with a tankless square, a 7-minute video, and North Korean soldiers. For Putin, this humiliation may have been unbearable, but the shrinking of the parade can't be explained by military depletion alone. Behind Putin staying on the square for only 10 minutes and leaving quickly, a much deeper fear may lie. To understand this, you need to think about the weeks before May 9th. Ukraine had been pounding Moscow with drone swarms for weeks. A drone hit the 36th floor of a skyscraper just 6 kilometers from the Kremlin. 2 people died in a missile and drone attack on Cheboksary, and Putin knew this could happen at Red Square on May 9th. Canceling the parade was impossible. That alone would have been a declaration of defeat. But holding it safely wasn't something Putin could do on his own, either. And this is where perhaps the most concrete evidence of Putin's weakness emerges. He had to bring in Trump to secure a 3-day ceasefire just to hold his own parade. Zelensky's ironic response summarized the psychological dimension. The Ukrainian president issued an official decree declaring that he allows Russia's parade to continue. The decree included the exact coordinates of Red Square. Ukrainian weapons will not be used at these coordinates. The leader who once intimidated the world now appeared to need permission from his enemy for his own square. But Zelensky's guarantee only covered Red Square, not the rest of Moscow. And Putin knew this. This may be why he quickly left the square after his 10-minute speech. While Red Square was safe, that assurance ended the moment he stepped off it. And where Putin went may be equally significant. According to the EU intelligence document, Putin has been spending time in renovated bunkers, particularly facilities in the Krasnodar region, since the start of the war, sometimes staying underground for weeks. His presidential residence in Valdier was deleted from Yandex Maps, a measure previously applied only to high-security military sites. While frequent visits to military facilities were made in 2025, not a single visit occurred in 2026. So, it's conceivable that Putin left the square after his 10-minute speech on May 9th and retreated to a secure bunker. The EU intelligence document, simultaneously published by CNN, the Financial Times, adds another dimension to this picture. The Kremlin has been on high alert since March 2026 over the risk of a coup or assassination attempt. And the attack Putin fears may come not from Ukraine, but from his own political elite. The report states that Putin particularly fears an assassination attempt using drones by members of the Russian political elite. Former Defense Minister Shoigu is mentioned as the figure associated with the risk of a coup. The security measures on the square confirm this fear. Mobile internet and SMS were completely cut. Over 100 Pansia S-1 air defense systems were mounted on towers around Moscow. Officials were banned from wearing wristwatches near Putin. Mobile phones were prohibited. Devices without internet access became mandatory. The fireworks display was cancelled across Moscow, and Russia's defense ministry threatened a large retaliatory missile strike on Kyiv if the parade was disrupted. A leader who used to give hours-long speeches, climb on tanks, and present himself as invincible now can't even stand in his own square for 10 minutes, cuts his own capital's internet, and asks his enemy for a ceasefire. This isn't paranoia. It may be realizing the true scale of the situation. And the words "war is ending" may be the expression of that realization. And Putin's paranoia may not be unfounded, because concrete escape signals are coming from the Kremlin. Just days before May 9th, Deputy Minister of Natural Resources Denis Boot fled the country and reached the United States. The defection of such a high-ranking official, particularly one with critical economic intelligence, is highly unusual and points to deep internal fissures. Historically, the Kremlin's security apparatus has been notoriously effective at preventing such escapes. This incident suggests a significant erosion of control and loyalty within the regime's inner circle. According to the Moscow Times and Kyiv Post, But traveled through Belarus to Georgia, then to the US, slipping through the FSB's radar. This is the first known case of a Russian official of this rank fleeing the country. And But was not an ordinary bureaucrat. He was responsible for natural resources. Being responsible for natural resources in Russia means being responsible for the only thing of value the country has. This man knows where oil is sold, how sanctions are circumvented. This information could be extremely valuable to Western intelligence, and Butvi's ability to escape the FSB speaks volumes on its own. He passed all background checks, stayed in this position for years, and his family is alleged to have relocated to the US weeks earlier without being noticed. This may indicate serious cracks in the regime's internal security structure. In a regime built on absolute power, security chiefs blaming each other, a deputy minister escaping the EFSB, and intelligence documents being leaked simultaneously to 3 different international media outlets. When all of these are evaluated together, the emerging picture may be very clear. These walls are cracking. On top of this entire picture come Putin's own words, and these words may be the most important part of the entire scenario. I think this matter is coming to an end. This sentence was confirmed by BBC and Al Jazeera, and you need to think about who is saying it. A leader who for 4 years said, "Victory will be ours," who described Ukraine as a gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis, who defied NATO. Now the same man is implying the war is ending, and he's addressing his enemy as Mr. Zelensky. I appeal once again to the servicemen of the Ukrainian armed forces. Take power into your own hands. It seems we'll be able to reach an agreement more easily with you than with this gang of drug addicts and neo-Nazis that has taken over Kyiv. On the Ukrainian side, Mr. Zelensky is ready to hold a personal meeting. Yes, I've heard that. When a dictator begins to humanize his enemy over 4 years, this may be a signal that he's preparing to sit at the table with that enemy, or that he's been forced to. According to Al Jazeera, Chatham House researcher Kia Giles warns against interpreting Putin's words as a reliable indicator that the conflict is truly approaching resolution. But he also draws attention to one possibility. The best we can hope for is that Putin realizes Russia is actually not winning the war. And Putin's normally hours-long speech ending in 10 minutes, his attempt to blame NATO's eastward expansion for the war, but Ukraine not having joined NATO, and NATO having turned Ukraine away to avoid provoking Putin. All of this may be drawing the portrait of a leader trying to justify defeat. Putin's economic confessions also support this interpretation. His telling oligarchs, "You must put money into the economy," can be read as an open indicator that the regime's coffers are rapidly emptying. It is reported that the central bank's dollar and euro reserves are running out, and that foreign currency and citizens' bank accounts could potentially be seized. Interest rates and inflation are out of control. Open dissent is appearing in Russian media for the first time, and military commanders may have begun questioning the war. Antidepressant sales are reported to have more than doubled. This single figure alone may summarize the state of public morale. As Tendar's analysis states, Putin's words come from a position of distress and weakness. The diminishing of May 9th means diminishing him and his administration. Putin is not currently serious about ending the war because Russia hasn't achieved anything yet. Ending the war now would formalize defeat, but he's trying to start a new round of negotiations to distract from his humiliation. So the sentence, "war is ending," may not be a peace proposal, but it may be the moment a leader who cannot yet accept defeat for the first time openly announced the smell of that defeat. And the answer to why Putin is speaking like this now may lie on the battlefield. According to Mediazona and Medisa's research, Russia may have lost 352,000 soldiers since February 2022, 261,000 confirmed dead, and 90,000 declared dead or missing through court rulings. The figures released by Ukraine's defense ministry as of May 9th paint an even larger picture. Approximately 1.34 million Russian personnel losses since the start of the war, including killed, wounded, and those rendered combat ineffective. In just the first 4 months of 2026, the daily average exceeds 1,000, with over 31,700 personnel losses reported in January alone. The equipment picture is even more striking. Approximately 12,000 tanks, over 24,000 armored vehicles, more than 41,000 artillery systems, and over 279,000 drones destroyed. In the Black Sea, 33 warships and 2 submarines lost by Ukraine, a country without a navy. So, even according to Russia's own independent sources, losses are no longer in the tens of thousands. They're far beyond hundreds of thousands. The gap between Ukraine's defense ministry data and Media Zona is debatable, but the picture both sources present points in the same direction. This war is eroding Russia a little more each day, and the technological gap on the front is accelerating this erosion. Ukraine shoots down 90% of drones, while Russia's success rate stays around 64%. Ukraine equips its own tanks with active protection systems, technology that detects and destroys incoming drones in the air. Russia welds more metal plates onto its tanks. Ukraine's Defense Ministry's January 2026 report clearly states, Russia's armored vehicle and artillery stocks are experiencing serious depletion, and the capacity to replace the majority of losses does not exist. And Ukraine is no longer just defending. It has gained the capability to strike 1,500 kilometers deep into Russia. Oil facilities, military infrastructure, even Moscow itself is within range. And the fact that Red Square's security could only be ensured with Ukraine's permission. This may be the most concrete evidence of where the balance has shifted. In the 5th year of this war, Russia controls approximately 1/5 of Ukrainian territory, but progress has been limited to a few hundred meters for months. And each day, Russia's war capacity erodes a little more, while Ukraine reaches the level of exporting military capability. On one side, 2026 technology, on the other, First World War logic. In this picture, Putin saying war is ending is not a show of strength. It may be the political translation of erosion on the ground. When Putin stepped onto Red Square in 2022, tanks were behind him, leaders were in the stands, and he was declaring he would cleanse Ukraine of neo-Nazis. When he stepped onto the same square in 2026, there were no tanks, no leaders, and he was addressing his enemy as Mr. Zelensky. He left the stage in 10 minutes. He presumably retreated to bunkers and he said, "War is ending." The army that drove 6,000 tanks at Kursk in 1943 couldn't put a single tank on Red Square in 2026. The man who used this square as a showcase of his power for 20 years no longer has the material or the courage to fill that showcase. And that showcase is emptying a little more each day. What remains genuinely unknown is how much further it will empty before a definitive end, or what form that end will ultimately take.